Good morning, children. Today we are going to learn about different kinds of forces. Okay, you have learnt about the force, okay, the nature of force, what force can do. Now, today we are going to learn about different kinds of forces. So, depending upon how the forces are applied, they are categorized into two. They are contact forces and non-contact forces. So what do you mean by contact? Contact means we are keeping in touch or we are touching. Okay. So when we physically touch a, a body before applying the force, when we are trying to apply the force, we are actually making a contact, a physical contact. When you are touching a body, then such a force will be called a contact force. Okay, so what will be non-contact force? Forces which we apply from a distance. Okay, without touching, we are just applying it from a distance. Okay, that is called non-contact forces. So let us see what are contact forces once again. The force which act on bodies by making an actual contact is called contact forces. Okay, so if this, you can see in the picture, this boy wants to push the chair, another boy wants to pull the chair. Can you push or pull the chair without touching the chair? No, isn't it? You have to go, you have to touch the chair and then you can push it or pull it. If you had learned some magic tricks, you could have done it from far. But whenever we apply muscular force, we have to go and touch the object. So if we are touching it, that means it is a contact force. So that means a push or a pull is an example of a contact force. Now let us see some more examples. The force of friction or frictional force exerted by a surface on a body in contact with it in a direction opposite to the direction in which the body is moved on the surface. So force of a friction is an opposing force. Now what is force of friction? Let us understand. You can see a brown book which is on the table. If we are trying to push it, okay, then a force of friction will act in the opposite direction of our push. So when body is trying to move in one direction, there is a force of friction which acts between the book and the table surface. If it is kept on the table, then the table surface and on the book, okay, in between them, when the book starts rubbing on the table surface, there is a force of friction. So you understand that force of friction is an opposing force. Whenever motion happens, there is a force of friction. Like if you are riding a cycle, then there is a friction, force of friction, which is trying to stop your movement on the road. So there is a force of friction between the tire, cycle tire and the road, or car tires and the road. So whenever there is one surface rubbing over the other surface, always remember there is a force of friction which acts in the opposite direction of the motion. So it is also a type of contact force. So we have learned push, a pull or frictional force are example of contact forces. Now let us add one more to this. The force of tension in a string when a load is suspended from it. You have heard the word tension. You say tension, tension, tension. This is not the tension when you have, which you feel in your mind, mental tension, when there is an exam coming up or some problem coming up. This is another tension. So remember, what tension is this? This is a force of tension. Whenever you tie a string, okay, from a support, see here there is a support and there is a string tied and there is a weight hanging on the string. So the weight acts in the downward direction. Okay, you can see the weight is acting in the downward direction. So as a reaction to this, there is another force which acts on the string in the upward direction. So there is a force acting in the upward direction which is trying to act in the opposite direction of the weight. Weight is acting in the downward direction, but there is an upward force. The upward force in a string tied to a support. when a load is suspended from that string, that force is called tension. So you can just learn the diagram of this. What is the force of tension? It is a force which acts in the opposite direction of the weight. Weight is acting in the downward direction while tension acts in the upward direction. Okay, so force of tension in a string, that is also an example of a contact force. So how many contact force you know now? One was push, pull. Okay, push and pull, they are examples of contact force. What was the previous force that we learned? Forgot? Let us come back. Force of friction. Force of friction acts when a body is rubbed over another body. When a body moves over another body, it acts in between the two surfaces, isn't it? And it always acts in the opposite direction of motion. If the body goes forward, force of friction will act in the backward direction. If the body is moving backward, then the force of friction will act in the forward direction. Okay, so these are two more examples of force of friction: force of tension and force of friction. Then force of reaction normal to the surface when a body is placed on a surface. So there is another force which is also contact force. When a body is kept on a surface, its weight acts in the downward direction. Okay, so there is a law given by Newton which you will be learning later on. Newton says to every action there is an opposite reaction, isn't it? Whenever we whenever whatever action we do, there is an opposite reaction. Okay, so that is Newton's third law. So here, when the book is applying a force on the table, then the table will also not keep quiet. It will also react. It will apply a force on the book. So that is called the force of reaction. If you are pushing a wall, the wall will push you back. Okay, with the same force. So that is called action and reaction. So here there is another example for contact force, that is the force of what? Reaction. Force of reaction. So whenever a force is applied on a body, the body will also react. It will apply an equal force. So these are some examples of contact forces. So I will just revise what were the forces that we learned. Contact forces. First was push and pull. Second was frictional force. Third, force of tension in a string. And next was force of reaction. Action and reaction, isn't it? Force of reaction. Normal to the surface means it acts in the perpendicular direction. The force of reaction is normal to the surface. You see, it is at an angle of 90 degree from the surface. So just go through these contact forces. Now we come to non-contact forces. Forces which act on body with no contact, that is from far off. You can apply a force by being at a distance from the body. That is called non-contact forces, like gravitational force. You know that earth pulls every object towards itself. Who found this gravitational force first? Who discovered it? Yes, it was Sir Isaac Newton, isn't it? Sir Isaac Newton was sitting under an apple tree eating an apple, and suddenly one apple fell down. So it set him thinking, why things come down? Why don't they fly up? So then he came to this conclusion that earth attracts every body towards itself. Okay, so you know that this is a force which is applied from a distance. So let us just read here what is given. Gravitational force between two bodies at a distance, such as the force of attraction between two heavenly bodies, the force of attraction on a body by earth. Okay, so even heavenly bodies, they attract each other. So that is also a force of gravitation. The moon will attract the earth will have an attraction on the moon. Okay, so these are all examples of gravitational force. The weight of the body is the force by which earth attracts that body. So the weight of a body is also called its force of gravity. Okay, so because of that weight, it tends to fall downwards or come downwards. Like leaves of trees, they fall downwards. If you throw a ball also, where will it go? It will come in the downward direction. So these are some examples of gravitational force. Then you have electrostatic force. So you know electrostatic forces is because of charges. Okay, some bodies are get charged when they are rubbed against another body, like some will get a positive charge or another will get a negative charge. So when these charges are brought close together, what happens? They either attract each other or they will move away from each other. So the forces which exist between charges is called electrostatic force between charged bodies. Okay, so you see here electrostatic force between two charged bodies at a distance. They either attract or repel each other. Unlike charges repel, unlike charges attract each other, while like charges they repel. Like charges means the same charges. The positive charge and positive charge will repel. Negative charge and negative charge will repel, move away from each other. Okay, but unlike charges they attract, that is opposite charges they will attract each other. Positive charge will attract a negative charges. Okay, so you can see it when you have a plastic comb and you rub it on your hair, dry hair, not oily hair. You have to rub it on your dry hair and then you bring small pieces of paper near it. So you will see that the pieces of paper get attracted towards the comb. They will come closer. So one of you can do this experiment and send me the video of it. Okay, see here, like this. Take a comb, rub it on your hair and keep it near some small pieces of paper. So you will see that the piece of paper will be attracted towards each other. Okay, so you can just send the video of this if you can do the experiment. Then you have magnetic forces. You have seen magnets, isn't it? How magnets they attract each other. So magnetic forces exist between a magnet and another magnetic substance or two magnets. Okay, you see magnet attracts small pieces of steel pins towards it, isn't it? So then a magnet will attract another magnet also. So this is also a force which acts from a distance. So we have seen three non-contact forces. So what are the three non-contact forces? One is the gravitational force, second is the electrostatic force, and third is a magnetic force. So magnetic force, you see here, like poles repel each other. See, same poles, they repel each other. North pole and north pole of a magnet will repel each other. So if you buy two magnets and bring the same poles towards each other, you will feel as if both the poles are pushing your hand away from each other. They don't want to come closer. While unlike poles, they attract each other. So unlike poles of a magnet, that is not similar. Okay, north and south, they will attract each other. Just like electrostatic charges we said, same way, unlike poles attract each other, like poles repel each other. Okay. So here we have seen the examples of non-contact forces also. So I will repeat, what were the contact forces? Push, pull, then force of friction, force of tension and reaction force. These were the examples of contact forces. And what are the examples of non-contact forces? That is the forces which we can apply from a distance without touching the body. Without touching, what forces can be applied? One is gravitational force, electrostatic force and magnetic force. So I hope you will remember this. Today in your Google Meet class, I will be asking you questions based on this. Be very, very prepared. Okay?